There are certain emotions, especially pain, that is absolutely unfathomable for most of us. One such is, of course, the what happened to the Jews in World War II. The other one is what happened during partition in India and Pakistan. And the third one is the Kashmir genocide in 1990 of Kashmiri Hindu Pandits. This is Sanjeev Kulkarni here with a review of the Kashmir Files, which I happened to watch just a couple of hours ago. This is probably the fastest ever review that I've done, and hence this is in a bit of a raw state, if you may. Also, the other reason being that I'm in India right now, so I had an opportunity to see this movie in India in a theater that I grew up watching so many movies, so it was nostalgic in many ways. But back to the movie. This is a heart wrenching, gut wrenching story of what has happened to the Kashmiri Hindu Pandits and the atrocities that were imposed on them by the supposed Muslim freedom fighters, but they're nothing short of Muslim terrorists, either funded by Pakistan or native Kashmiris. I don't want to get into that. But the atrocities that happened to these Hindu Pandits, supposedly on the one night, I'm not an expert and I feel ashamed that I probably do not know this part to the extent and the depth that I need to know of what has happened in my in the pride of my country, Kashmir. But as the movie depicts it, supposedly on one night where so many of the Kashmiri Hindu Pandits were brutally murdered, women were raped, men were killed, where they had slogans like either convert or die. Yeah, I mean that's the kind of brutality that was lashed out at them on one single night. And what happened after that, the refugee camps, moving through different parts of the country like they are foreigners in their own land, and never able to get back to their homeland. These are emotions that most of us would never ever, hopefully, touch wood, have to experience in one's lifetime. But then when we look around, I'm discovering that there are so many of my friends who actually have lived that journey, who have recollection of that journey, and in many ways are feeling a sense of, I don't know if relief is the word, but it's certainly a sense of relief as well, that this story is being told to the wider world, that everybody is getting to see this today. Sorry if I go rambling because that's really what the movie does to you. But coming back to the movie, if I were to look at it objectively as a movie, the art of movie making, then I do have some critical comments that I'll share at the end. But the movie does go in a back and forth format, where they're trying to. It's a narrative of a certain family, the Pandit family, and they go in a back and forth format in that on that day in 1990 or thereabouts, and then what is happening right now in a 2016 and 2021 narrative. Pardon the background noise, as I said, I'm in Mumbai, so with that comes in a certain level of background noise, as you can imagine. The narrative goes well. You can appreciate it's in kind of three different settings. The narrative goes well. Uh, until the first half, especially, it's very important that you listen to every dialogue that is being said, because the past flashbacks are more like a storyline of the incidents that happened. The current is more of a narrative. Talking about narrative, there is a very important point that one of the character calls out, who plays the role of a reporter, that the other war that's going on right now with Kashmir is the war of narratives, and that is so true. Depending on who you speak to, when you speak to, how you speak to, you get different narratives, and that is what really gets into your head. Is that really happening on the ground or not? Only folks who are there can tell, or you can experience yourself. Um, so there are principally four friends. The way this current narrative goes, the 2021 narrative goes, there are four friends of this senior Pandit, which is played by Anupam Kher, and I'll come to that in a bit. One of them is Mithun Chakravarti, who plays an IAS officer who's responsible at that point in time. And the other one is Puneet Isar, who plays the role of a senior police officer, probably a DGP at that point in time. When I say that point, I mean the 1990 when all this happened. The third one is Prakash Pellavade, who plays the role of a doctor who is also stationed at that point. And the last one is Atul Srivastav, who plays the role of a news anchor or the media person in the mix. Each one of them has their own story of how they were helpless at that point in time to help this one Pandit family, which is supposedly a representation of everything that everybody who was there at that time. I mean, they're trying to tell the story through one family. And they're friends with the Pandit family, and each one has their own story of why they were helpless and therefore are extremely guilt ridden through then till now. So you kind of see that in their body language and so on and so forth. And then, of course, there are other characters. The, the journey continues from the the mass massacre that happened there, followed by them going towards a refugee camp, followed by the journey from there. And then there is a younger generation. So they're trying to tell the story through the eyes of both the older generation that lived the genocide and the younger generation that probably has no recollection but is now being clouded by all these narratives. And they try to clear that narrative, decloudify it, and give it the right picture. That's really how the story progresses. Now, coming to the acting part, it's really difficult to point out a character who has probably not performed well, because everybody has played their part so well. They are engrossed into what is happening. But personally, two that really stood out. One, of course, has to be Anupam Kher. Like as I mentioned, this pain is unfathomable for most of us. But here is a person who, in some shape or form, has gone through that pain, Anupam Kher. And you can see the brilliance of the actor just coming out. You know, there was this Saransh that we saw when he was really a young man and he played an old man's character. Here he is an old man, he's playing an old man's character, but the kind of pain that you see in his eyes when he makes that last speech to his grandson, or when he goes to the eye doctor saying that, you know, he doesn't want the high powered or the expensive lens because he wants to use his limited money for his grandson's education, is heart wrenching. You can see the actor coming out, and probably he's just reliving those gory moments, is how I really saw it. And the other one, in my opinion, has to be Chinmay Madlekar. The reason I say that is it is very easy to be on this side of the narrative, that is the Hindu side of the narrative, and feel empathetic towards what's going on. But Chinmay plays the antagonist, so he's the main villain. Trying to play that when inside your heart you know that you don't even stand that person. You are really, your heart is out with the Hindus, but you are playing that gory Muslim character. It takes some level of acting, I guess. So that's the reason that character also really stood out to me. Chinmay has done a fantastic job. I am planning to watch his other movie, which is out right now, which is a Marathi movie called Pawan Khind, where he and both Mrunal Kulkarni, incidentally, are present. Anyways, coming back, so that's really what the storyline is with these characters. Now coming to the critical part, like I mentioned, of course, the story is so heart-wrenching that this story had to be told. But then where I found it a bit disappointing was the fact that The producers, Z is a producer, and Pallavi Joshi is a producer. Pallavi Joshi also plays a very important role in the movie, more like an antagonist, but not like the main character, present day antagonist, if you may. So these producers have kind of released it almost like a movie, right? They waited till COVID was done so that they could release in theaters, and all the right reasons, yes. But then, as a moviegoer, as a person who likes this art form of movies, and I'm quite interested in the process, I felt disappointed, especially towards the end, because they completely lost the narrative. The script just fell flat on its face. The last 20 minutes are like you will be trying to figure out what in the world is going on here. You're so engrossed, the narrative is progressing, and then suddenly, boom, gone. So that part was very disappointing. Just like you see because I'm holding the camera right now, um, just like you see my camera shaking, that's how the entire movie is. In some instances, a shaky camera is fine, but in other instances, you cannot keep shaking the camera like that. It has to be still. So that was very disappointing for me. And as I said, the last sequence leaves more questions in your head than, like answers probably of what exactly happened. So I hope they could have done better there, especially because they've released this as a movie. Probably if you had released this in a documentary format, people would have loved it, but maybe it wouldn't get the kind of attention it deserves. So that's probably the only place where I felt really disappointed as a moviegoer, because you lost what you had built up. The last 20 minutes literally takes away everything that you built up in the movie till then. Um, that's really the only thing I would say from a critical part. But kudos to Vivek Ranjan Agnihotri, kudos to Pallavi Joshi, kudos to Z for taking on such a stand and presenting this story to us, to the world. Everybody has to see this. Ignore the last 20 minutes if you want it, but please go and see this movie. It opens up your eyes to what has happened in this world that we live in this beautiful place called as Kashmir. Very long review. Uh, I'm literally speaking my heart out, and as I said, I saw this movie just a couple of hours ago, and I'm putting this review forward. So, sorry about that, but I highly encourage you. Please go ahead, have a look at this movie. And yes, one character I forgot to mention, of course, is Darshan Kumar, who plays the grandson. Everybody has a moment to shine. I think Darshan Kumar also had his moment to shine, which he's done very well, except that the script doesn't support him in the end. So, sorry, Darshan, not your fault. Um, Again, please do watch it. It touches you very deeply. Sanjeev Kulkarni signing off.